There's a question that has haunted humanity since the first warrior raised their weapon. What makes a man truly lethal? We're not talking about strength. We're not talking about bravery. We're talking about something far darker. Something that has evolved with each era, transforming like a disease that adapts to its host. Because lethality isn't a constant, it's a response. In every age of human history, a new way of killing emerged, and with it, a new kind of warrior who mastered it to the point of becoming a legend. What you're about to discover isn't a list of heroes. It's a journey through the evolution of death itself, from muscle to mind, from ritual to invisibility. And I warn you, by the end of this video, you'll understand something you won't be able to forget. Part 1. When human strength was enough. There was a time when war was simple, brutal, bloody, direct. There was no distance between you and your enemy. No technology separated you from what you were doing. You looked into the eyes of the one you wanted to kill. You felt their last breath. In that primitive world, lethality depended on one thing: the body as a living weapon. Your strategy was useless if you couldn't endure the pain. And above all, nothing mattered if you had something to lose, because the deadliest warriors of that era shared a terrifying secret. They had accepted their death long before entering the battlefield. Oh, and when a man doesn't try to survive, he becomes any army's worst nightmare. Rome encountered one of these men in 73 BC. His name was Spartacus, and his story begins not with glory, but with chains. Spartacus was a gladiatorial slave in a field in Capua, where men were beaten, chained, and forced to kill for entertainment. They were less than animals. They were commodities, bleeding meat for the masses. But something shifted in Spartacus's mind. He grasped a fundamental truth. When you have nothing to lose. And when you have nothing to lose, no army in the world can stop you. One night, Spartacus and 70 gladiators took knives from the kitchens and slit the guards' throats. They stole weapons. They freed more slaves. And they fled toward Mount Vesuvius, knowing that Rome would hunt them down, torture them, and crucify them if they were captured. Rome sent a small army to block the only path to the mountain, and convinced the gladiators would starve to death. But Spartacus did something no Roman strategist expected. He descended the opposite side of the mountain using ropes made of vines, appeared behind the Roman army, and massacred them in minutes. It wasn't a battle, it was an execution. What Rome didn't understand was that Spartacus wasn't just strong. He was hunger transformed into discipline. He was humiliation transformed into tactics. And his army of slaves, peasants, and deserters grew to tens of thousands, ravaging the Italian countryside, defeating every legion that stood in his way. Rome began to wonder something terrifying. What if Spartacus marches on the city itself? This is where Rome's richest man comes in, Marcus Licinius Crassus, a man whose fortune today would be worth $20 billion. Crassus paid for an entire army out of his own pocket, not out of patriotism, but out of ego. He wanted to be the man who crushed the greatest rebellion in history, and he cornered Spartacus in southern Italy, on a peninsula where the gladiator was trying to cross to Sicily to regroup. But the pirates he hired betrayed him. They took the gold and disappeared. Spartacus was trapped. The final battle was a slaughter. Spartacus fought his way through hundreds of Roman soldiers, trying to reach Crassus, trying to kill him with his bare hands. But he never reached him. He fell beneath the weight of 2 dead centurions who collapsed on top of him as he fought off enemies who surrounded him on all sides. His body was never found. Thousands of his men were crucified along the Appian Way as a warning. Rome had won. But Spartacus had proven something the empire would never forget, that a slave with nothing to lose can shake the world. Now, let's travel across the ocean to what is now central Mexico. There, in the heart of the Aztec Empire, lived a man whose name was whispered in terror even by warriors trained for war from childhood. His name was Tlajumulco. At 19, Tlajumulco led his tribe in a battle against the Aztecs. It was no ordinary war. If you lost to the Aztecs, you didn't die on the battlefield. They took you away alive. They tied you to a stone atop a temple, and 5 priests opened your chest with obsidian knives to tear out your still-beating heart, offering it to the gods as tribute. That was true defeat. Tlajumulco fought with a wooden mace so enormous that an ordinary warrior couldn't even lift it off the ground. With that weapon, he smashed skulls as if they were eggshells. Bones turned to dust. Blood rained down. Wherever he moved, his enemies fell. But numbers always prevail, and eventually he was captured. When he was brought before Emperor Moctezuma, the Aztec ruler saw something in Tlajumulco that left him speechless. It wasn't just his strength. It was his mind. A man who had fought knowing he would lose. A man who had accepted his fate and still sown terror. Moctezuma offered him his freedom, and Tlajumulco refused it. He said it would be dishonorable to return to his people after being defeated. He preferred to die. Moctezuma, confused, then offered him command of an Aztec army against an invading tribe, thinking that perhaps Tlahuicol sought redemption in battle, and Tlahuicol accepted. And he massacred the invaders with a brutality that horrified even the Aztecs. He returned victorious, and he demanded that the emperor sacrifice him. Moctezuma, impressed and bewildered, agreed, but he did not grant him a simple death. He granted him a spectacular one. They tied Tlahuicol to a stone pillar in a stadium filled with nobles. They gave him only his mace, and they sent against him, one after another, 8 of the empire's most famous warriors. Tlahuicol defeated them all, until the 9th finally stunned him with a blow to the head. Only then, collapsed and bleeding, did they open his chest and tear out his heart. What kind of mind rejects freedom? What kind of man asks for his own death after winning? That is the question that haunted the Aztecs long after Tlahuicol's body had cooled. Because Tlahuicol was not just a warrior, he was a man who had transformed death into meaning. And that, perhaps, is the most terrifying form of lethality, when someone turns their end into their most powerful weapon. But history was about to change. Because while these warriors conquered with muscle and will, something new was being born in the world, something quieter, something more dangerous. If this has made you reflect, it's no coincidence. Dale, like now, and subscribe, because in Part 2, we leave the body behind and begin to kill with the mind. Part 2. When the mind started to kill more than muscles. There was a moment in history when humanity realized something unsettling, that you can win a fight before it even begins, that the true battlefield isn't in front of you, but inside your enemy's mind, and that if you know how to manipulate fear, honor, and ego, you can turn the strongest warrior into a still-breathing corpse. This marked the birth of psychological warfare. The warrior ceased to be merely a trained body and became a strategist, a manipulator, and a hunter who studied his prey more than his weapon. And of all the men who mastered this dark art, none did so like Miyamoto Musashi. Musashi was born Benosuke in 1584 and was expelled from his home by his father at the age of 6. His monk uncle tried to teach him peace, but Musashi was not made for peace. At 12, he killed his first man, a master swordsman. He disarmed him and beat him to death with a wooden stick. At 16, he did the same to another master. That day he knew his destiny was not tranquility. It was death. He changed his name to Miyamoto Musashi and began wandering Japan, challenging duelists, masters, and entire schools of warriors. And he never lost. But here's the secret. Musashi didn't win by being the fastest or the strongest. He won because he understood that honor is a cage people build for themselves. And he knew how to close the door. In those days, duels in Japan were ritualistic events. There were rules. There was respect. If there was an agreed-upon time and place where 2 warriors faced each other, Musashi turned all of that into a weapon. He arrived late, hours late, while his opponent waited in the sun, sweating, feeling the minutes drag on, the murmurs of the crowd, his reputation beginning to be tarnished. Musashi knew it. He felt it. And he appeared when his enemy was already seething with rage. And an angry man is a dead man. Because Musashi, completely calm, he tore him apart with cold precision, while his opponent attacked uncontrollably, blinded by humiliation. But that wasn't all. Sometimes Musashi didn't even wait for the formal duel. For him, the challenge was the starting bell. If someone challenged him, the duel had already begun. He would appear out of nowhere, in the middle of the street, at his rival's house, anywhere, and attack without warning. There was no honor in it. But there was victory. And for Musashi, that was all that mattered. Then he trained with every kind of weapon. He fought against specialists in spears, in chains with sickles, in long swords. He faced multiple opponents at once, and always walked away while his enemies lay on the ground. 61 duels to the death, 61 corpses, 0 defeats. But the most terrifying thing about Musashi wasn't his technique. It was his mind. He wrote a book called The Book of 5 Rings, where he explained his philosophy of combat. And if you read it, you realize something chilling. For Musashi, every duel was a mental game, a theater where he was the director, and his opponent was an actor who didn't know he had already been defeated in the script. Musashi didn't fight against bodies. He fought against egos, against expectations, against the mental cages that people build around themselves. And when you understand that, when you realize you can kill someone by first destroying their certainty, their pride, their sense of control, then you no longer need to be the strongest. You only need to be the most patient, the coldest, the most calculating. Musashi lived to be 60, almost impossible for someone who spent his life defying death. He retreated to a cave and wrote his book. And when he finally died, It was of natural causes, peacefully, surrounded by silence. But his legend, that dark shadow of a man who turned honor into a trap and his mind into a knife, that never died. And with him, the world learned a lesson, that true lethality isn't in your muscles. It's in your ability to break the enemy without touching them. But evolution does not stop. Because while Musashi was demonstrating that the mind could be more deadly than the body, something new was brewing in the shadows of history. Something that neither force nor strategy could stop. If you understand what you just heard, you already know that the worst battle is not physical. Dale as he neteskate barigst, subscribe and stay with me, because what's coming is already beyond our control. Part 3. When death became invisible, there is a way to kill that is more terrifying than any other. There is no duel, no honor, no chance to defend yourself, only silence, and then nothing. It is death that comes from where you cannot see, carried out by someone you will never know, in a place you will never find. It is death as a ghost, and once it exists, war ceases to be epic and becomes cold. Yet ain't welcome to the age of the invisible hunter. 1939, Finland. Stalin's Soviet Union invades with hundreds of thousands of soldiers, tanks, and planes. It's an unequal war, a giant power against a small, snow-covered country. The Soviets expect to crush Finland in weeks, but they haven't counted on one man, a 33-year-old farmer who hunted birds with his father since childhood, a man who knows every inch of the frozen forests as if they were his own home. His name is Simo Häyhä, and he's about to turn a white landscape into a living nightmare. Simo isn't a professional soldier. He's an amateur marksman with an old rifle, the same one he learned to shoot with as a child. He doesn't even have a scope, just iron, wood, and superhuman patience. But there's something about Simo. The Soviets don't understand until it's too late. He isn't fighting a war. He is the landscape. He is winter. He dresses entirely in white. He buries himself in the snow for hours, motionless, and is barely breathing, waiting. His rifle barely peeks out from among the frost-covered trees, and when a Soviet patrol passes nearby, Simo pulls the trigger. A soldier falls. The others panic. They search. They shout. They fire into nothingness. But there is no one. Only trees. Only snow. Only silence. And then another shot. Another body collapses. The Soviets begin to call him the White Death. Because he's not a man. He's a presence. A specter that haunts the Finnish forests. There's a whisper that ends in blood. They send elite snipers to hunt him down. They send dogs. They send artillery barrages over entire areas where they think he might be hiding. And Simo keeps shooting, keeps killing, keeps disappearing. The Winter War lasted only 105 days. In that time, Simo Häyhä racked up more than 500 confirmed kills. 500. The highest number of any sniper in any major war in history. And each of those kills was a message. That it doesn't matter how many soldiers you send, and how much artillery you have, or how much numerical superiority you possess. If there is a man who knows the terrain, who has infinite patience, who needs no glory but only silence, that man can paralyze entire armies. The Soviets become paranoid. No one wants to walk first. No one wants to explore an open area, because they know he's there, somewhere, waiting. And when they finally decide to move you, when you finally take a step, when you finally breathe too heavily, oh, it may be the last thing you do. Simo was wounded near the end of the war. An explosive bullet shattered his jaw. The doctors didn't expect him to survive, but he did. He recovered. And when Finland finally made peace with the Soviet Union, Simo returned to his farm. He became a moose hunter. He lived a quiet, peaceful life until his death in 2002 at the age of 96. But his legacy remains a chilling truth. That lethality reached its purest form when it no longer needed confrontation. When the warrior became invisible. When killing ceased to be an act of force or cunning and became an act of absolute patience. Because Simo Häyhä wasn't the strongest man. He wasn't the most brilliant strategist. He was simply someone who understood something that modern warfare would confirm time and again. That the deadliest warrior isn't the one who seeks out a fight. He's the one who waits silently until the fight comes to him. And by then, it's already too late. You've seen 3 eras. 3 ways to be mortal. Spartacus and Tlahuikole, who turned their bodies into weapons and their certainty of death into absolute power. Miyamoto Musashi, who discovered that the mind could break an enemy before any sword. And Simo Häyhä, who proved that the most terrifying death is the one you don't see coming, carried out by someone who doesn't even need you to know they exist. But here's the ultimate truth. Lethality isn't about strength, or intelligence, or technology. It's about adaptation. Every era invents its own monster, and that monster is simply a reflection of what humans are willing to do to survive. If this journey has unsettled you as much as it has me, give me a like and subscribe. Until next time.